Hello, everybody. We're back with another completed long game, and this playlist is those games where myself and my opponents have several days per move. So that's why this playlist is building up quite slowly. And just like all the other grades that we're trying to build up, ratings we're trying to build up, the idea of this is to get to 2000 eventually on this. So we're getting there. This game takes us to 1578. Obviously, the bullet and the blitz and the rapid play grade, the bullet and the blitz are already at 2000. The rapid play grade, as I recall, is 1800 and something. So we're slowly but surely we're getting there. And this is a game that is comfortably our best result so far. The opponent here has been as high as 2400, which is pushing towards master strength as a rating, so they're very good. And as we play this one, they're 2199s, basically 2200, 2200. And so let's go through what happened in this one. We had black. Our opponent played e4. I do not like playing against e4. I find that the lines after this are not a whole lot of fun. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that there's so much learning to do. The French defense is okay, but I find this, or I don't know, I can never quite get to grips with it. I don't like it. The Caracan I play sometimes is okay. Nothing wrong with that. I do quite like that one. And the Sicilian, oops, that's cheating. The Sicilian that I play in this is a fantastic opening. It scores highest for black, but the trouble is when you start to play against opponents of a higher level, they've memorized and know all of the lines, and it's just so complicated. There's so much knowledge of this already, where games have already been played in the Sicilian book theory. So it's difficult to play that against players better than you because they'll know it. So that causes a bit of a problem. So as I play higher players, what I'll tend to do is I will play this opening, play the modern defense. I will, because I've been learning it, play the Scandinavian occasionally. And I'm also starting to look at something. I've got a book on it that's interesting, that is known as the Hippo defense, which, oops, not there, which sounds ridiculous, but you basically put all your pieces along the third rank, your pawns and your pieces, third rank and second rank, and just sit and wait for white to reach a bit too far and then hit them on the counter attack. So I've got a book on that. So maybe we'll see some hippo defenses at some point in the future on this. But for this game, I shrugged and played e6, but I had no intention of playing the French defense in this. As I recall, bear in mind this game started months ago. I'm pretty sure I wasn't planning on playing the French. I believe I was planning on playing the Sicilian, but in a slightly unusual way. And this move. So it's now become a Sicilian defense, but I've managed to get white to play the pawn out before they put the knight out. So a bit different, a bit of a weird way around things. Now our opponent develops the knight and pawn takes pawn. So this is what's called transposition in chess, where you get to one opening via a slightly weird series of moves. But we've got there. So this is called the Sicilian defense. And I'm going to play what's called the Scheveningen variation. I told you the theory in the Sicilian was complicated. There's loads and loads of different versions of the Sicilian. Knight f6 is fine. For what it's worth, e5 looks very pretty, but it doesn't really work. But research that separately. And knight c3 and now d6. And this little shell of pawns here is what's called the Scheveningen defense, Scheveningen variation. So complicated, but whatever. This is good, solid, safe defense. A bit negative for black, a bit defensive, but it's okay. And f4. Okay, lots of moves that you can play here. I've got a feeling that the most successful move against this is g4. I think that's known as the Keres variation, but f4, okay, fine. So white's trying to take room in the center, look. So lots of space for white because these pawns are attacking the center. But can I expose them? Are they too far forward? Well, we shall see. Bishop e7, develop a piece, might castle. Sometimes in the Scheveningen, you actually just stay in the middle of the board with bishops and pawns here, and you just hope that your king is actually safer in the middle, which is a bit unusual, but you'd sometimes do. Bishop e3, fine. Castles, not in this game. I decided to put the king away, which is a bit risky. Computer's saying maybe a6, put the pawn here. Then that pawn, bishop here, and try to play on the diagonal, which is obviously okay. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so then our opponent plays queen to f3. So what he's considering doing is castling this side. And then what's going to happen is we're going to both try and pawn storm each other. So I'll be pushing these pawns towards the black king. White will be pushing these pawns towards my king, and it'll all get, in theory, very unpleasant. Knight to c6, develop a piece. Castles, as predicted, and knight takes knight. So because my position's a bit cramped, I haven't got a lot of space. Yeah, we saw that white's got more of the space in the center because of these two pawns. One way to relieve the fact that I've got no space is just to swap some pieces off. So that's what I did. Okay, bishop takes, queen here. And the computer's saying white is a little bit better in this position. And again, that's because of all this space in the middle of the board. But that's it. There's nothing else. It's just the extra room that white has to maneuver. So e5, okay, takes. Obviously, I have to do something. I mean, my knight's under attack. And there's not really a very nice square to put the knight. I can't put it here or here because of the queen. That's obviously just silly. Knight here, just probably could have played it. Knight e8, yeah, it's not hideously hideous as my next move. But knight here is not so clever because after knight takes, possibly queen takes or pawn takes, the bishop can drop back. And then we've got things hitting my queen and things hitting this in the middle of the board. So let's just have a look. If I go knight to d5, I don't like this. The computer will tell us knight takes, pawn takes, and then I'm assuming it will say bishop to c3. No, it's got better moves. So actually it wants to play pawn takes pawn. But for the newer viewers, plus 1.8, white is starting to, yeah, the computer's starting to say white's doing pretty well. So I didn't do that. What I instead did was, I think it's the strongest move. Yeah, computer-like. So pawn takes pawn. And then pawn takes pawn could have gone with the bishop. So now this bishop's a bit blocked. And this pawn is isolated. So it's not possible to defend this pawn with another white pawn. There's nobody next to it. So that's what's called an isolated pawn. So in an end game, it might be weak. However, at this moment, it's attacking my knight. It's stopping my bishop from going anywhere nice. It's giving this knight possibly a nice square to go to, and it's generally a bit of a pain in the backside. So yeah, long-term advantage for me in the endgame, maybe, because it can't be defended by another pawn. Short-term, it's a bit of a nuisance. However, it has blocked in the enemy bishop. So, okay, and that might be why the computer says that white should have played bishop takes instead of pawn takes, but okay, whatever. So now I can play knight d5. Well, I haven't really got a lot of choice. Where else am I going to put it? I just can't put it there. It would look ridiculous. And bishop c4. Okay, well, let's swap. Now, the computer doesn't like that much. The computer wants me to play knight to b4, from where both my queen and knight will be threatening this pawn. I have to be honest, when I played this game, I don't recall even considering knight to b4. Probably because the bishop's defending and the knight's defending. So maybe I thought it was just a bit pointless. So I suspect I decided to just swap the pieces off for the same reason I'd said before. Look, I'm struggling for space. Let's just swap pieces. But okay, knight takes. It's not awful. Computer's giving it a tick, so fine. And bishop takes, attacks my queen. For the newer players, you can't really in this position play pawn takes. And you watch the analysis now, it's now going to say advantage black. And the reason for that is simply that in the end game, it's actually calling it an outright blunder. Wow, it really doesn't like it. Look, red question marks. I don't think there's any, yeah, there's no immediate tactic to win material for me, win pieces, but these pawns now, these two are both isolated and, excuse me, and they're doubled. This is isolated. This is isolated. In an end game, this crushing pawn, this pawn formation is going to be crushingly bad for white. And of course, it opens up the possibility of the bishop getting in to attack the king. So that's why white can't be playing with pawn takes here. It just ruins the structure, ruins the pawn formation. So that's best. I've got to put my queen somewhere because I don't want to lose. You know, bishop takes queen's a bit good. So I go here because I'm at least threatening something. And white plays bishop here. So we've now got bishops coming this way. The queen could come this way. And all of a sudden, I don't know, if white can bring rooks into the game, perhaps to here, and across, suddenly I've got a very edgy, weak-looking kingside. So I was starting to get a bit worried here. And that's why the computer's saying +2. It's the material, the pieces are level, but it's saying that white has the better position, the better chances to win. And that's why this extra space, the fact that this bishop's doing nothing, and because this bishop's trapped, this rook's doing nothing, and white has these open lines potentially pointing at my king. So how do we get ourselves out of this? Well, f5 is what I did. I decided to try and complicate it because I just couldn't really see what else to do. I decided to try and mess the position up to get this activated, to get this activated. Computer wants me to play rook to b8. And I assume we're going to put yes. So then queen to h3 is what it's giving. So threatening checkmate. Presumably g6 to block the checkmate. And what's it giving next? Queen to g4. Interesting. So I guess to throw this pawn down the board, swap it off, and then you've got the rook coming in. Ouch. Oh, it's now decided that queen h4 is a bit rubbish. So what's better? Queen h6? Okay, queen h6. Now that's nasty. So maybe white can somehow reroute this bishop to this square, get the pawn here and checkmate me. Oh, no, not there. There. I guess this pawn can still come up the board, as I said before, and then this line's horrible. I mean, it's just vile. I didn't like it at all, which is why I didn't play rook b8. I remember saying, look, I just think I'm going to get squished here if I just don't do something. So I took a risk and played f5. It's a risky move. And interestingly, by the way, white can play here en passant. Does he do it in the game? Yeah, he does. So this is a new one for the beginners. So if a pawn has moved 2 squares and it lands next to an enemy pawn, so only if it's moved both squares, the opponent can do this on the next move. They can take the pawn as though it had only moved 1 square, and that removes itself from the board. So en passant. And of course, I could do it as black. Say I had a pawn here. This one moves forward 2 squares, pawn takes, and that one would disappear. But there is a video about that in the Big Lessons for Beginners playlist. So, okay, so my opponent takes. He has to do it straight away if he's going to do it. Bishop takes. So now I've got some goings on, at least I thought I did, because the rook's facing the bishop. And if I had another move now, bishop to g5 would be great, because it would be check, and the rook would be attacking the queen. So I've actually got a threat now. Even though the computer thinks white's better, I've at least got some sort of threat. And maybe I can push this pawn forward and get the bishop into the game somehow. Who knows? So queen e4, the obvious threat here, bishop and queen are pointing at this square. So that's not going to be very nice. And the only way I can do anything about it is to block it. So pawn in the way, protected by his mate. But the trouble is we've now got a hook. I was really worried in the game that my opponent would do, not do that, pawns don't move sideways, would do this. Once again, that same theme, oops, of trying to open up this line for the rook. But he didn't. Bishop takes, and the computer says it's the best move, which surprises me. But okay, I'll take its word for it. Obviously, I have to recapture. Oh, right, and here it comes. Yeah, okay, so we knew this was coming. Okay, so now I try to swap queens, and in fact, I force the queens off because it's check, and I'm touching next to the enemy queen, and my queen is defended. So we're forced off the queens. And I just decided to do that because it's much more difficult for this attack. Look at all these pieces heading towards my king. Much less likely that this attack will win the game for white with no queens on the board. So, okay, h5, obviously, because we said so, and king g7. And h6, it actually thinks is a mistake. Like the most natural move in the world is to push this pawn closer and give a check. The computer actually thinks that our opponent should take here. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. which surprises me. I'm amazed there. I think a human player would just do exactly what our opponent did. H10, I'm just looking to see why. So in fact, the computer's recommending takes. I would obviously have to take back. And then just abandoning this line altogether and putting the rook in the middle of the board. Wow. So completely ignoring that line. Oh, computers are something else. They can calculate so well, but I can't think that a human player would ever like come off of that open line with their rook. So it's interesting. But it didn't happen. Our opponent played the obvious move, h6, fine. And king f6 is best. I need at this point, we're getting to an end game now. There's only 2 rooks and a bishop left. So we're pretty much in the end game. And in the end game, if you can get your king active, get it towards the middle of the board at the same time as keeping it safe, that's usually better than having it stuck in the corner. So in the middle game, yeah, you want your king stuck in the corner, away from all the trouble. In the end game, he becomes a really valuable piece in the fight. So g3 attacks my rook, rook f3, because I'm now threatening the pawn for what it's worth. Rook df1. Now that's annoying because I can't move my rook because obviously the rook is pinned. So takes is pretty much forced, takes is forced, and king e7. The computer's actually saying I should go this way. That's really irritating. Now that is one that in the actual game, I decided not to do that because I thought, no, the computer's not recommending this at all. I actually thought that this would be a nightmare to deal with because I can never move my bishop. In fact, it's just decided it's the best move. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. Yeah, it has this. Yeah, and that I just thought was going to be brutal because how do I get my bishop out? And if I can't get the bishop out, how do I get the rook out? So I can't play here because the rook will take the rook. If I think about trying this move to go here and protect the rook, then I just walk into this and that's best. And it's just horrible. So it's really strange that the computer's saying it likes king g5. I think it's probably miscalculating that. So it's saying king g5. I think king e7 might even be better, but who am I to argue with the computer? Anyway, so g4, our opponent wants to push these 2 pawns here. And the reason is that it might be possible at some point to play bishop takes pawn, pawn takes, and then march this down to the end before I can do anything to stop it. So I've really got to keep a little eye all the way through the rest of the game on this sacrifice. Because, of course, if this pawn gets here, white gets the queen back, and then I'm finished. So bishop, I've got to get the rook out. So bishop d7, fine. The computer's saying I could have put the bishop here and played bishop b7, but I don't think there's a great deal in it. You'll notice the difference now has gone back to just a small advantage to white. So I'm definitely closing the gap. E5 is best. I spent some time wondering about that in the game because I thought that maybe, maybe that was a bit risky. The bishop might be able to get in behind me. It's now not protected by anything. And was it going a bit too far forward? But it was attacking here. So that's good. So I'm glad it was the best move. G5, because he obviously doesn't want to lose his pawn. And bishop e6, it says, is okay. What does it want me to do in this position? Rook to d8. Okay, so it wants me to go here, I guess lining this up on the same line as the king. The move then, rook here attacking my pawn. I'd have to defend the pawn. And the game goes on from there. What's the analysis? Oh, wow, the computer says at that point it's dead level. 0.00. That's really, really interesting because this isn't a million miles off the position we get at the end of the game, funnily enough. So bear in mind, 0.00, computer saying dead level position. But what did I actually play? Bishop to e6. Now, I've no intention of playing bishop takes pawn. What happens if you do that, and it is pawn comes up here, protected by its mate on there, and this bishop that would be here is totally stuck. You're going to lose the bishop. The rook's going to come across and munch the bishop, or the king can do it, depending, and you just lose a piece. So that's not why I did it. I did it because I just needed a move, and that making the bishop a bit more active looked like a good move. Okay, so that's fine. And this mistake, by the way, was once played by one of the greatest players in the history of the game, Bobby Fischer, in a world championship match. He actually blundered the pawn. And we think because he'd miscalculated, he thought after the opponent, Boris Spassky, pushed the pawn forward, that Bobby could somehow do this kind of thing to get his bishop out, but no. So even the world champion, or he was the world champion after the end of that match, blundered a piece. So we can all do it. Anyway, king e3, as you would. Bishop d5, how frustrating. It says that's not the best move. It wants me to just go rook to d8, which just puts the rook on the open file. So I guess that makes sense. I can understand that. I wonder why it doesn't like bishop d5. I think I did bishop d5 because I didn't want that to go there. But okay, bishop d5, opponent, oh, okay. Opponent plays bishop e4 and we've got 0.00 again. So apparently that just means it's a draw. And remember at this point, the computer can just see dozens and dozens and dozens of moves ahead. Yeah, once the board is empty of pieces, it can outcalculate us as human beings. And it wanted me to play bishop takes bishop. How interesting. So bishop takes bishop. It thinks that takes. Now, what's next? Right, so it doesn't think I should defend this pawn at this point. It thinks I should put the rook here, let this one go, and win this one instead. Presumably, no, that's not what it's saying. No, not at all. Oh, this is too complicated. Now, so what's it recommending? The best move, rook f3. And this is why you can't compete with computers. So it wants to put the rook here, and then not even rook takes pawn is okay, but it well, I don't understand that at all. Why would you play rook f3? It's so strange. Yeah, very confusing stuff. Very confusing stuff. But you can start to see why this is such a level position because. Sorry, I've gone backwards too far. Yeah. So where did we go? So we got to here. So bishop e4 is offering the trade of bishops. I should actually take it then. So now it's saying instead of 0-0, so instead of it being pretty much a draw after bishop takes bishop, it now thinks white's got some chances again. So that was a mistake by me. b3 is okay. He's just blocking my bishop, but okay, fine. Rook c8, obviously, I'm going to have to do something. So here I go, threatening to attack the pawn. c4 blocks the rook, and we're nearly getting towards the end of the game here now. b3, because I don't particularly want the bishop to take this pawn. Just to clarify, by the way, a couple of moves back, white can't play. We can play bishop takes pawn, but after rook takes here, he's got some problems. He can't really defend that. Unless he makes his rook really passive, which he's not going to want to do. Passive as in defensive, just tied down. So there and there. Rook f2, rook d8, and now I'm occupying this lovely open file in the middle of the board. He's occupying this open file. Please note as well that there's still no way to play bishop takes, pawn takes, because if the pawn gets forward, I'm just in time to get my rook in behind. So I'm always keeping an eye on that sacrifice. Rook d2, and now I'm not going to swap the rooks. I deliberately said nah, because there's no entry point for this rook. It can't go here, it can't go here, it can't go here. And as long as I just guard this square rather than having a piece on it, he's got no way to get in. So I just decided to go back to this open file. And I can't get in either. I mean, I can go there, but it gets me, the square root of 0 gets me nowhere. And anyway, my opponent's going to stop me. So he goes back again. He desperately wants me to swap the rooks, but I don't want to. Maybe I should. But rook takes f2. Okay, and back I go. And at this point, we agree to draw because I don't really see what my opponent's going to do. The computer wants to not go for the draw. Obviously, computers are programmed to try and win. So what's going to happen is just repeat the position. And if you just repeat the position, it's just a draw. So there we go. Yeah, there's no way for him to get in. He can't get in this side. He can't get in this side because really that's threatening nothing. And these squares are guarded. And that's what we got. So a really good result without particularly exciting chess. Actually, it was a pretty game. Nothing dramatic happened, but it did add us quite a lot of points to our rating, and it is a very good result to get a draw out of somebody with that kind of rating. So quite pleased with that overall. Anyway, it was a tournament game, so there's going to be a rematch with this player. And in the rematch, I'll have the white pieces. So we'll see if I can do anything there. All right, thanks for watching. See you all next time.